Hi, Argo kids. It's Mrs. Thorson. I hope you're having a nice day. Today, we're going to go over section 1 of chapter 9, which is the powers that the president has. So there's 10 of them, and we're going to go through them by category. So the first category is the executive powers. The foremost power that the president has is execution of the law. That is their number one job, to execute the law. And in the Constitution, it gives two provisions. They have to take the oath of office, and in it, they have to say they will faithfully execute the laws, which means if a law is passed, it's their job to make sure it's actually put into play. The second one is the ordinance power. Now, what this is they can issue what's known as an executive order, which basically is some type of rule or regulation or policy that a president makes that has the exact same effect that a law does, but there's no Congress involved. Here's the difference, though. If Congress, like for instance, when President Obama and Congress passed the Affordable Care Act, when the new president came into office, President Trump, he can't get rid of that because that's an act by Congress. He still has to faithfully execute that law because it's a law. But let's say there's an executive order that the new president doesn't like, they can get rid of that immediately. Some other executive powers include the appointment power. They can appoint different positions of government, which include ambassadors, diplomats, cabinet members, top aides, and federal judges. But most of those have to be approved by Senate in the name of checks and balances. The next one is the removal power. And except for judges, they have the right to hire or fire anyone that they have appointed. Probably the most famous example of that would be when President Andrew Johnson fired his Secretary of War, Andrew Stanton, because that's what got him impeached. All right, the next type of powers are diplomatic and military powers, meaning powers working with other countries. One of them is the treaty-making power, where they can create a formal agreement between two or more countries, usually to end a war, but treaties have to be approved by 2/3 of the Senate. Now, the executive agreement power, think of an executive agreement is like an executive agreement is to a treaty as an executive order is to a law. It's something that the president can do that's very similar to a treaty, but doesn't need congressional approval. And just like an executive order, the new president can immediately get rid of it if they don't like it. Another power they have is known as the recognition power, where the president of the United States has the power to acknowledge the existence of states. And how do they do this? By appointing ambassadors. So I'm going to tell you this, for a very long time, we did not recognize Cuba as a legitimate country. It's not that you're like blind to it and you don't know it's there. You know it's there. It's just we didn't feel their government was legitimate, so we just refused to have any type of diplomatic relationship with them. But about 5 years ago, President Obama did officially recognize them, and now we have an embassy there with an ambassador. And then the one you probably know the most is the commander-in-chief power. It's almost without limit because there's been several hundred undeclared wars throughout American history where the president just sends troops somewhere because they have that power of commander-in-chief. But after Vietnam, people were really upset about the president just sending troops somewhere, and they felt like it was too much power. So Congress passed the Wars Power Resolution, which basically said that Congress has more power in that, but it really hasn't honestly been enforced. And then the last two powers are his legislative and judicial powers. This is where the president has checks and balances over the other two branches. So with the legislative power, this is his check over the legislative branch. How does he do this? Every year he gives a State of the Union speech to Congress that basically says, this is what I want you to do. He creates a budget. Congress doesn't have to listen to it, but he does submit it and gives them economic reports. But here's the big one. Another one that he can do, and State of the Union, that's in the Constitution, as is the veto power. President can, every time he gets a bill on his desk, he has four choices. He can sign it. He can full out veto it. And then the last two is like the 3 and 4 are like doing nothing. So if the president does nothing and Congress is still in session for 10 days after he gets it on his desk, it automatically becomes law. But if the president does nothing and in that 10 days after Congress stops their session, usually around Thanksgiving is when they stop a session, then that bill dies because Congress can't be in session to like overrule it or anything. That's known as a pocket veto. A judicial power, this is where the president, anytime there's a judicial decision, especially with a criminal case, can override that decision by granting reprieves or pardons or amnesty. So a reprieve just lowers a sentence. A pardon totally forgives someone for their crime, so they become free. And amnesty is a blanket pardon. So some famous examples of pardons, President Ford pardoned Nixon. Okay, so he wasn't going to be charged with any type of crime. And then amnesty is an example of that, like draft dodgers. All of those draft dodgers that were in the Vietnam War, they were given amnesty. They were basically told you're never going to get in trouble for that. So that's what amnesty is. Okay, so now next you're going to get 10 real life examples of different types of presidents using these 10 powers, and you got to tell me your opinion on it. Do you think they used it correctly, or do you think they abused their power with this? I will talk to you guys later. See ya.